Live from London, this is The World Today.
Hello, I'm Jamie Owen. Welcome to the programme. Our top stories. Talks about talks. The White House tries to rearrange a visit by Israeli officials as Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu faces a political backlash for cancelling. Our other headlines, the United Nations warns the starvation in Gaza is turning into a famine and could amount to a war crime, stepping up pressure on Israel. Divers in the United States recovered 2 bodies from the water beneath the Baltimore Bridge that collapsed when this container ship crashed into it. And Asia's future direction is mapped out at the Boa Forum. China promises to be a driving force behind global economic recovery. The White House says it's working to reschedule the council meeting between the United States and Israel following a request by the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. An Israeli delegation was due to visit Washington to discuss a planned ground offensive in Gaza's city of Rafah, but Netanyahu cancelled this trip following the United States' refusal to veto a United Nations Security Council resolution demanding an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. Well, let's see if we can cross to Tel Aviv and try to talk to our correspondent, Sarah Coates. I think we're unable to talk to at the moment, but we might return to Sarah Coates in Israel in just a few moments. In the meantime, let's talk to our correspondent, Akram Al-Satari, in the southern city of Rafah in Gaza. Akram, just bring us up to date with the latest attacks in Gaza, particularly the situation around the Al-Shifa hospital.
Jamie, the situation at Al-Shifa hospital is unfolding into a catastrophe according to the description of the government media office. Around 200 Palestinians. The total number of deaths in Al-Shifa hospital is around 200 Palestinians who were killed inside and around Al-Shifa hospital. Around 1,000 Palestinians were also reported to be arrested by the Israeli occupation army. According to the Palestinian sources in that area and the eyewitnesses as well, heavy and fierce fire exchange is going on in the meantime. The bombardment can be heard from very far away, and also the smokes on the sky can be seen also, which is indicative of how fierce the fight that is ongoing in that area. According to the Palestinian and Israeli sources as well, the Israeli army is still conducting its operation in Al-Shifa now for the 11th day, and it's still arresting, targeting, killing, and also destroying some of the very important departments of the Al-Shifa hospital.
We're hearing more warnings, Akram, about the risk of famine. What are you seeing in terms of humanitarian aid?
The humanitarian aid that has been entering Rafah area and also the north is below the minimum. When you are providing a population of around 2.37 million Gazans with around providing them with around like 200 trucks a day, this is below the minimum. The general population needs around 1,000 trucks a day in an average day. That is not a war day. Now with the war, with the destruction, with the injured people, and with the displacement of a very large number, half of the population is children and elderly people, the need to food is increasing, and that need is not being met. This has been a concern that was voiced by international figures, by UN figures, and by other international NGOs who have been trying to help the Palestinian people. Now 2.37 million Gazans are dependent and reliant on the food aid that is provided by the international organization, and their need is not being met. And the hunger and starvation is evident and apparent not only in the Gaza North, but also in the Gaza South, where the need to medication, the need to water, and the need to food are also increasingly acute needs that are not being met due to the very limited number of humanitarian aid supplies that are allowed into the Gaza Strip.
Akram, thank you for
that. Which
that.
is less than 30% of the needs of the general population in Gaza.
Akram, thank you. Our correspondent Akram Saltari in the city of Rafah in Gaza. Let's see if we can return now to Israel and our correspondent Sarah Coates, who's watching events for us in Tel Aviv. Sarah, these talks, or talks about talks, may be back on the table. Can we expect any move or change in Israel's plans?
Jamie, that is doubtful, given what we've been hearing from the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He just continues to double down on his stance that he will repel international pressure, including from the United States, not to go down into Rafah. And it is important to point out here that while that relationship between Washington and Israel continues to sour, we've heard just today from the Israeli President, Isaac Herzog. He's been hosting some US Democratic Congress people saying that there's an unbreakable bond between the United States and Israel, saying that we share the same objective of eliminating terror. So it certainly does seem as though this delegation will indeed actually go to Washington, but they're unlikely to actually try and find any alternatives to this operation in Rafah or get a blessing, you might say, to go in there. What they're likely to do is put down this hard line that we've been hearing from the Prime Minister Netanyahu, that this is necessary to achieve what he's calling his war goals. Let's take a listen to Netanyahu.
Victory is within reach. It's a few weeks away. Now we are told, this is it, last point. Now we are told, you can't do this. If you go into Rafah, you're going to have a humanitarian catastrophe. You're going to have, 30,000 civilian dead. Okay. That's not true.
And Jamie, a little earlier today, police arrested at least 3 people, removed dozens of others. They were down at the Kerem Shalom border crossing. They were trying to stop trucks from going into the Gaza Strip, taking in this vital humanitarian aid.
And there have been more attacks in both the West Bank and Israel's northern border.
That's right. A manhunt, Jamie, is ongoing near Jericho. There was a shooting incident a little earlier today. A masked man wearing an army uniform, he opened fire on an armoured bus, also a number of cars, injuring 3 people. He is still on the run, and authorities have now set up roadblocks throughout the West Bank, also closing the Allenby crossing, which connects the West Bank to Jordan. Now, also tensions are continuing to rise. Also in the north, rocket sirens have been ringing out throughout the day, while the military says it also shot down a suspicious aerial target from Lebanon, which was heading into Israel. So certainly a lot of concern there on that northern border, really, given what we've been seeing over this past 36 hours. Jamie.
Sarah, thank you for that. Our correspondent Sarah Coates in Tel Aviv. Well, let's get more on the situation in Gaza now and talk to Tarek Yasharverk from the World Health Organization. Tarek, welcome, first of all. How would you describe the situation in Gaza now? What are your people telling you?
Well, thank you. The situation is really getting worse. That's what we hear from our colleagues on the ground, who are trying on a daily basis to reach hospitals that are still functional, and now we are down to 10 out of 36 hospitals that are providing some basic health services. So we had 2 more hospitals that stopped functioning because simply there is no food, there is no material, there is no fuel for electricity. So the situation is getting worse and worse. We are not able to reach Al-Shifa Hospital that was just mentioned in your program for days now. We are hearing about what is happening, just like your correspondent was saying, but we are not able to get there and to help health workers inside Al-Shifa. In other hospitals, the situation is equally difficult. We hear about malnutrition that is being seen by doctors. Ministry of Health reports that 31 people have died from malnutrition, including 27 children. So the situation is really desperate, and it's getting worse. and we just can't see the end of this nightmare for the population of Gaza.
When the United Nations warns that the starvation in Gaza is turning into a famine, and they say could amount to a war crime, could it?
I will leave that to colleagues from the High Commission of Human Rights to deal with definitions. What we know is that analysis that have been made by the group organization is showing that there is acute malnutrition, especially in north of Gaza. One child out of 3 age under 2 years is acutely malnourished. And I just mentioned cases of people dying and children dying from not having enough of food. Not having enough of food and nutrients that is needed can have a really horrible consequences, not only for children, but for pregnant women and a newborn. So we really need to find a solution. A solution is to bring more aid, as it has been already said, through all the possible crossings that exist and all the possible ways to get that food to people to Gaza, to have a ceasefire so we can have an environment where health system can start doing what it's supposed to do.
Tarek, I don't know if you managed to hear our earlier reports, but the suggestion that talks may be restarting, the diplomatic narrative might be recommencing. How long have these people got, do you think?
Well, we should have done all of that yesterday, to put it that way. People in Gaza are hungry. When we try to go to hospitals with our trucks where we have some medical supplies, people stop our trucks hoping there is some food. People are desperate. You have seen the scene, so there is really no time to lose. This is the moment where everything should be done to flood Gaza with food and other things. Unfortunately, what is coming in, as your correspondent was saying, is nearly not enough. So we need more of crossings being open, we need more supplies to get in, and eventually we need a ceasefire so this humanitarian space can be created for us to do our job. Because even if we get things inside Gaza, if we can't move it within the Gaza because there is a fighting, we don't get security clearances to move, then that is not going to help. So we really need to be able to move wherever it's needed.
Tarek Yasharevic from the World Health Organization, thank you very much. Russia's leader says his country has no plans to attack any NATO member states, but Vladimir Putin says that if the alliance's F-16 fighter jets are sent to Ukraine, they will be shot down. Putin has described the possibility of Moscow-backed attacks on Poland or the Baltic states as complete nonsense. However, he added that both NATO's F-16 jets and airfields in third countries hosting them would become legitimate targets if they were used by Ukrainian air forces. One person has been killed in a Russian attack on the Ukrainian city of Kharkiv using what officials say could be a new type of missile. Investigators have described the device used in the assault as a guided aerial bomb. The strike on a residential area of Kharkiv also left 19 people injured, including 3 children. Elsewhere, 2 people were hurt in a Moscow-backed drone attack on the city of Zaporizhzhia. Ukraine and Poland are holding talks to try and resolve a dispute over grain exports that sparked mass protests by farmers. Polish farmers want customs duties to be reimposed on Ukraine's agricultural exports. The tariffs were lifted 2 years ago when the invasion began. The EU has reached a deal to extend tariff-free imports on Ukrainian food, but with restrictions on products deemed to be sensitive, including poultry, oats and honey. But farmers in Poland and across the EU want new measures taken against Ukrainian grain imports, which they say are flooding local markets. Divers in the United States have recovered 2 bodies from water beneath the wreckage of the collapsed Baltimore Bridge. They were among 6 construction workers who fell into the river when a cargo ship crashed into the Francis Scott Key Bridge. Officials say the cargo ship was carrying hazardous materials, some of which leaked into the water. Our correspondent Owen Fairclough reports.
We've had more details overnight of not just the investigation, but indeed details of the final moments before the Dali struck the bridge, just seconds between the Mayday alert being raised and officials here on the bridge managing to close it to traffic and stop this catastrophe escalating even further. We've also had more details as well from safety officials about their investigation. They've confirmed, federal transport officials, safety transport officials, that they have been able to board the Dali and retrieve the crucial voyage recording equipment that's like to inform them of those last moments of that ship as it collided with the bridge. There are also reports as well that the propulsion system on that ship failed. We know from that video we've seen that the lights went out on the ship, but obviously those investigators want to know more details. They also want to hone in on what appears to be a troubled safety history for this ship, with reports, for example, in 2016 that it collided as it left the port of Antwerp. There are also other reports about safety problems that were documented and are available on publicly available databases. Understandably, perhaps safety officials here don't want to comment too much on those details, but they clearly are investigating the history of this vessel.
We are going to be working with NTSB as they lead their independent investigation. It's too early to speculate, of course, what NTSB will find, but if they discover or determine anything that should be considered in the regulation, inspection, design, or funding of bridges in the future, we will be ready to apply those findings.
There's clearly a wider issue here with reports about the bridge and just how much protection it had for a collision for a cargo boat of this size. There's been some conjecture about that. What is clear, though, is that bridges like this one, built some 50 years ago, were never designed for the advent of globalization and interdependent trade with ever bigger cargo ships carrying sometimes thousands and thousands of containers as they crisscross the world. And that's something that the US federal government is going to have a look at as it looks at the infrastructure around the United States and needs to consider just how much it can keep up with the ever-growing demand for globalized products and the way that they're transported across the world. Owen Fairclough, CGTN in Baltimore.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, Asia's gathering of the big hitters. China pledges it aims to be a driving force behind global economic recovery as the Regional Investment Bao Forum opens.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhinos? And unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
I think it should be more global cooperation.
I would like to hear more the voice of the developing countries.
Globalization has lifted more than 1 billion people out of poverty.
The green transition has to happen. It's a necessity.
For China and the United States are important powers in the world.
What unites us is much more than what divides us.
And I believe China is committed to this agenda.
Join me, Juliet Mann, to set the agenda at these times every weekend on CGTN.
Events have consequences. Words create impact.
One more offensive in a long line of battles that's been ongoing for more.
Just got to be careful here with some gunshots. Excuse us.
The world today matters for your world tomorrow.
The number of casualties is growing quickly.
Why, this is one of the hardest hit towns in the region.
The world today, every day on CGTN.
Hello, welcome back. A reminder of our top stories. Talks about talks. The White House tries to rearrange the visit by Israeli officials as Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu faces a political backlash for cancelling. Our other headlines: the United Nations warns the starvation in Gaza is turning into a famine and could amount to a war crime, stepping up pressure on Israel. Asia's future direction is being mapped out at the Boao Forum. China's top legislator says Beijing aims to be a driving force for global economic recovery. Zhao Leji told the opening ceremony that China will further open its markets while continuing to provide more opportunities for foreign investors. Zhao also pledged the country would pursue green development and global cooperation in science.
China will proactively link with high-standard international economic and trade rules and build a market-oriented, rules-based and first-class international investment environment. Over the next 5 years, China's total import and export of goods is expected to exceed $32 trillion. This will further unlock the potential of China's supersized market with its more than 1.4 billion people.
The former United Nations chief, Ban Ki-moon, is the chairman of Boao Forum. He told CGTN that all countries must put global climate action at the centre of their development goals.
I'm deeply concerned by the way the international community are now taking on this climate action. We must take much stronger and faster action to make sure that by 2050, whole world's people will realize carbon zero, net to zero target. By 2030, we must make sure that at least 43% of global emissions will be reduced. Last year, 2023, was recorded as the highest temperature since 1850. That is very worrisome. Then the climate change has been causing a lot of very serious flooding and very bad desertifications. We must take urgent action to finish our leadership pattern. When President Xi Jinping announced carbon neutrality by 2060, I was a bit disappointed because the world target is carbon neutrality by 2050. But what President Xi Jinping said, because of absolute amount of emission, we cannot finish by 2050. But by 2060, we'll make sure that China will come net to zero by constructing 150 nuclear reactors. I was surprised. I could not believe if that can be done. But there was a very ambitious political commitment.
China says it'll lift tariffs on Australian wine from Friday. The tariffs of over 200% were first imposed in 2021, reducing Australia's previously strong market share in China to virtually nothing. The removal follows recent improvements in diplomatic relations. China said the anti-dumping and anti-subsidy tariffs were no longer necessary. The UK went into recession in the second half of last year, according to revised figures. The company shrank by 0.3% in the fourth quarter, following a smaller decline between June and August. Britain remains one of the slowest countries to recover from the COVID pandemic, but early figures show signs of growth this year. Everyone knows you shouldn't eat too much sugar, but despite all the health warnings, people all over the world can't seem to wean themselves off their addiction. The enduring power of sugar and the many shapes it takes is the subject of a new CGTN documentary called Sweet Planet. Our correspondent Ross Cullen reports.
It's hard to find a place in the world where people don't have a sweet tooth. And this new documentary from CGTN illustrates how we have long had a taste for sugary goods. The Minister Councillor from the Chinese Embassy in the Netherlands said the film had a deeper message about how food unites the world.
Sweet Planet is not only about
satisfying our craving for sweetness. It is a testament for the unifying power of food, celebrating shared humanity across borders.
It's more a case of telling stories that have evolved over centuries. And, you know, these sugary things have been around for a long time. And I really think in its processed form that we're consuming it too much today is really where the problem lies, not in itself. I think, you know, it will always have a part of our lives and should stay that way, in my opinion.
The documentary takes the viewer on a journey around the world of cakes, sugar and ice cream. While it showcased the joy such treats can deliver, the documentary also called for restraint. The chief executive of Insight TV, which worked in partnership with CGTN on Sweet Planet, said sugary goods should be consumed in moderation, since the World Health Organization recommends reducing sugar intake to lower the risk of developing health complications like weight gain and tooth decay. The organisers chose this location to launch the documentary, the Maurits House in The Hague, one of the country's most famous museums, home to some of the world's most renowned paintings, including Vermeer's The Girl with the Pearl Earring. From pastries in Argentina to deep-fried dough balls in Pakistan, the producers were satisfied that they had hit the sweet spot with this documentary. Ross Cullen, CGTN, The Hague.
And here's some more chocolate. In Paris, they're going for gold there with their sports-themed Easter eggs. They're creating caramel athletes, chocolate racetracks and egg podiums as the city prepares to host the Olympic Games. Chocolate lovers can splash out on a $2,000 creation or hit the sweet spot with more affordable products. The headlines again. Talks about talks. The White House tries to rearrange the visit by Israeli officials as Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu faces a political backlash for cancelling. Our other headlines, the United Nations warns the starvation in Gaza is turning into a famine and could amount to a war crime, stepping up pressure on Israel. And that is the world today. Thank you for watching. There's more news on CGTN Europe's channel on the Telegram app, or scan the QR code on the screen to get stories and updates sent direct to your phone. We're back with more news at the top of this hour. Coming up next, it's World Insight. For now, from all of the team in London, it's goodbye.
Hello and welcome to Europe's weather forecast. On Friday, the rain will be stretching from Iberian Peninsula all the way to western portion of Russia. Then getting into Saturday, there could be plenty of sunshine if you're living in much of Italian Peninsula, the Balkans, up to western Ukraine and Poland. For folks up to northern Europe, notice a possibility of sleet or light to moderate snowfall. Well, temperature-wise, the daily highs will go upward, especially if you're living across Central Europe all the way down to the Balkans over the next 2 days. So you can see the daily highs are very likely to touch mid-teens on Friday, even touch lower or upper 20s as we get into this Saturday. And moving to Western Europe, you can see the city forecast. London 16 to 5, light rain turning to partly sunny sky. Very similar feelings outside if you're living in the city of Paris. Madrid, you are going to have light to moderate rainfall 12 to 4, and down to Lisbon 15 to 9, also light rain. So you better keep your umbrella handy. Eventually across Central Europe, Brussels, you could have 12 to 1 showers. Moving to Berlin 22 to 9, partly sunny sky. And daily highs for cities like Warsaw and down to Vienna will be around a 25, low rain chances. Well, that's it for now. Stay tuned for more city forecast.